Hi there, welcome to Urbinary, the podcast cataloging the everyday and extraordinary in the city.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Urbinary. I'm Hoi,
And I'm Shidsa.
and today we are excited to have a returning guest, Dafni, whom we met in our second episode as one of the main organizers of the conference. Dafni also served as the track coordinator for Track 3 along with our own Giulia, titled Challenging the Role of Academia, the Impact of Research. Today, we'll delve into the discussions from her track.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure being here.
Thank you again, Daphne, for joining us today. We are excited to explore the thought-provoking discussion from your track. Here at Urbinary, we've pondered academia's role and impact extensively. Our podcast serves as a tool, a platform to challenge academia's sometimes rigid stance and ensure knowledge dissemination to all, and of course acknowledging its significance in shaping our collective future. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Urbinary.
So, Track 3's description sparks an intriguing discussion. Academia is often either self-referential, producing policies and strategies that remain on paper, or detached from society, speaking jargon and not being able to communicate effectively. Considering citizens as critical participants, academia faces the challenge of engaging with practice and society through less rigid processes. So let's explore this.
Indeed, we are curious about two main aspects. Firstly, why do you believe this topic is particularly important, especially in today's context? And secondly, what prompted the creation of this track and what were your expectations?
Okay, so first of all, I think that this topic is diachronically important because as researchers, regardless of our specific research focus or interests, we all operate within academia. So I think it's really important to reflect on its structure, on its effectiveness, on its potential. It's really crucial. Like to make a parallel, as citizens and members of society, it is our duty to know what's happening in the world, to vote, to express our opinion, and to practice our rights in general. So the same thing applies to academia as our environment on a different scale, of course, and in professional terms. So why do we think that this subject is particularly important today? I think I mentioned some of this in the previous episode, but I have the feeling that research is becoming increasingly specialized. So this results in a sort of detachment from a wider framework, let's say, in the sense that there is a lack of effective dialogue between disciplines or within a discipline itself, and thus difficulties in externalizing, in producing knowledge and externalizing it, communicating it towards society. So within our field as urban planners and designers, we are concerned with society. So our role is to ensure an inclusive and just communication. So what we think is that this is not always happening. So somehow the continuum of communication needs to be bridged. And a way to do this is to invent a language, like in the figurative sense, like a code, that is beyond, the academic norms of operating, like, I don't know, just publishing in scientific journals or going to conferences and being with people of your own environment, which is quite self-referential. So then regarding the second part of your question, what prompted the creation of the track are all the reflections that I just mentioned. So during discussions with all of the members of the local organizing committee, it became evident that we all sort of share the same concerns regarding the impact of academia and its contribution in society. And what I would like to mention is that even none of us is researching, is producing, let's say, knowledge on this particular topic, on the impact of academia. We all felt that we needed a space where to reflect on our roles and within academia, and then on academia's role with regard to society. So we just expected contributions based on this kind of self-reflexivity that would take a stance and discuss our role as young researchers and how we can render it more public, accessible, and progressive.
I certainly agree. I think knowledge and academia could certainly do with a lot more accessibility for the public to everyone in order to gain more insight on the topic. So, continuing with track three's themes, several questions are posed to participants, including how university produced knowledge can become more democratic and communicative towards civil society. So, as early career researchers and planners, how can we achieve less self referentiality within our fields and foster maybe professional and cultural shifts?
I think the starting point to achieve this is being self-reflexive. So maybe firstly to question how knowledge is produced, by whom it is produced, that is us. So us as researchers, young researchers, from all the backgrounds that, the different backgrounds that each of one has. So how this knowledge is produced, by whom, how each of us can personally contribute to this production of knowledge, and of course, for who we produce this knowledge, under which conditions, and like as an end result, what are the consequences of the knowledge we produce. So this means being self-reflexive means to approach research differently in general. So instead of conducting research on people or for people, produce research with people. So as researchers, getting into the shoes of the research. So like searching to bridge this distance between researcher and researched. Um, so yeah, I think this is one aspect of being self-reflexive as a solution to being self-referential. Another aspect would be, again, to question how we teach and what we teach, and in parallel, question what we are taught within academia, and how can teaching for urban planning and design become more practice-oriented and effective. So like this, people that start like at the university level, at the study level, can gain more experience and can be more involved in more practice oriented, let's say, research. So I think I basically replied with more questions than answers, but I think that it's crucial to reflect on them, and especially for us as young researchers who are at the starting point of their career and who perhaps want to foster some kind of change in this rigid framework in which academia operates.
Thank you, Daphne. With 10 participants in your track, including Giulia Lidestri, Nicosia, and Stefan Bars, who will be featured in upcoming podcast interviews, could you tell us what urgent topics they discussed in relation to the track objectives?
So we had 10 participants that got selected, and their contributions, like in terms of the themes that they treated, were divided in two groups, let's say two lines of reflection. The first one, that was actually the first session of presentations, had to do with rethinking research, and the second one with interacting with civil society. So in the first group, we had more theoretical approaches. For example, a participant addressed some tensions between planning epistemologies and methodologies. Another participant asked the very apt question of why do practitioners find theory not useful, which I think summarizes many points that we tried to touch within the track. And then we had some contributions on ways of doing research, so transdisciplinarity, bottom-up approaches, knowledge production. So the first group basically sought to fill the gaps instead of bridging them, as one participant said, and to mobilize awareness within our research and practice as urban planners and designers. Then the second group focused on participatory research. We had contributions that regarded sharing knowledge between academia civil society, and inhabitants in specific contexts, so participatory and activist research. We had a very insightful presentation on an urban living lab that portrayed, let's say, the role of conflict. Another one that addressed emotions in conflict that was really interesting, and I think really insightful in the sense that it was human-centered. And some other contributions tackling transdisciplinarity and again citizen participation in contexts that also for us that we're located here in Italy maybe are within out of our reach, let's say.
Urbinary.
That's a super interesting and very, very rich range of questions and research uh, topics going forward with a field. I think that we have certainly not thought about the humanistic aspects in planning and architecture. And so during the conference, each track organized a keynote speech. For track three, the guest was Giulia Wesley, a postdoctoral researcher focusing on urban inequalities and critical pedagogies. She discussed co-producing knowledge within urban ecosystems for just cities. So during her presentation, she discussed how do we learn to co-produce knowledge within a wider ecosystem of urban knowledge and practices to work towards socially and environmentally just cities.
We have extracted a segment of her presentation.
As knowledge co-production is inevitably complex, it's never a linear process. So it obviously also involves negotiating different opinions. It involves negotiating conflicts over time. Again, something that a lot of the track 3 presenters will be able to tell you much more about. And so learning is somehow an intrinsic characteristic of knowledge co-production. There is no co-production without learning. And ideally without co-learning, so collaborative learning. And most co-production projects that I know of have some form of explicit and deliberative engagement with collective learning built into their project design. So there are, for example, there are knowledge exchanges between different city partners. There is capacity building and training sessions for team members. There is extensive documentation of key learnings in the forms of briefs or guides. And what all those formats have in common is an acknowledgement that co-production brings not only individuals together, but really their institutional and cultural practices and that they inhabit. And so co-learning in knowledge co-production is not only about the creation of new ideas or new knowledge that is relevant to the project aims per se, but it includes learning and shifts in the culture, in the values, in how we recognize each other's engagement.
She emphasized the necessity of co-learning for co-production. What are your insights on this point?
So what Giulia presented was really insightful. One of the key points that we can take home from her presentation is that co-learning, as collaborative learning, is an essential part for co-production that stands for collaborative production, and that understanding each other, sharing knowledge in order to create change is a really crucial point in any process. Let's say that that involves people beyond academia, so like civil society, in participatory processes and so on. So co-learning essentially means to bring people together and to bring insights from their different backgrounds, identities, or skills. I think that this is really an opportunity for academia to step out of the box through this process of co-learning and co-production and to try to push some boundaries. So co-learning especially and also co-production is a potential tool for academia to learn from this process, from this co-learning process, and to incorporate such methods and techniques in teaching environments. So I think that co-learning could serve as an inspiration to create new pedagogies related to what I was saying before regarding how we teach. And I think another very interesting point raised by Giulia uh, was the fact that conflicts and tensions are part of the process of co-learning and co-production. And I mean, they are part of human nature. They are, as are emotions. So co-learning and co-production also creates the space to address such conflicts and tensions and emotions. And since our field is human-centric, I think that this is a very important advantage of such methods and processes.
I agree. I think if we don't have this co-learning, co-production process, I think academia would risk being stuck in like an echo chamber, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot agree more, especially when you mentioned about the, let's say, the sparks that can come up in this co-learning and co-production. I think that's the essence.
Urbinary.
Another significant moment was the roundtable jointly organized with Track 4 titled Eyes on Practice, Feet in Theory. Could you tell us more about why you selected them, the experts, and what goals you aim to achieve by inviting them?
Okay, so except for the 4 track chairs that were involved in track 3 and track 4, we had another 4 special guests, let's say. So firstly, we invited Silvia Ronchi and Stefano Salata from DASTU Politecnico di Milano due to their experience in scientific research and involvement in urban projects and strategies, both in the public and the private domain. So we aimed to listen to their insights on the role of academia in relation to practice. So let's say at the intersection of the themes that were treated by track 3 and track 4. Then we had another 2 guests, Eleonora Ciscato and Sara Lorenzini, from who are actually PhD and postdoc students at the University of Milan, and they're also members of the 17 Foundation. They are both young academics, so the reason we invited them, they both work on disciplines that are not related to ours, to urban planning and design. But the reason we invited them was firstly because they're young academics, and then because they're members of this organization. So within, let's say, their activities, they organize events and talks and take action, let's say, towards democratizing knowledge. They operate outside university. They employ methods of co-learning. So from invited them, we really sought to have this young, fresh activist approach that is regardless of research interests. And yeah, we were looking forward to hear, let's say, their thoughts on how to overcome boundaries and how to foster a general discussion on academia that would concern any young academic, let's say, regardless of their research interests.
Very interesting. And don't worry, our listeners, we will go back with this in our track 4 with introduction with Abdullah.
Urbinary.
Now, a key question we've posed to all participants: how can we bridge the gap between academia and the broader community to translate academic insights into real-world impact?
So I mentioned this at the beginning. I think this is all very related, let's say. For me, practically speaking, it's a question of language. So what I said previously about finding a common language, finding a sort of code in which we can communicate with the outer world. So we need to avoid or even forget academic jargon when opening ourselves as researchers to society. And if I can make a personal comment on this, I really find it, let's say, sad that most of my friends are not going to read my scientific papers, even if the content might be interesting for them. Just because of the language and their structure, they're not going to read it. So, of course, academia involves this part and has scientific norms, but I think we should really try to find other ways of communicating the content, the research, and the knowledge we produce. So that's it, that being a researcher should not just be reduced in publishing in scientific journals. I don't think it's enough. So the earlier we as young academics understand this, the better. We need to find more democratic tools. And for example, this podcast and the fact that we're carrying out these interviews on an event, let's say, on the conference, that was another way of sharing knowledge, is one way forward. And what I want to highlight is that, of course, finding new communicative tools does not mean compromising scientific complexity. So I think that's really where the challenge lies, in maintaining complexity, but finding ways to communicate it in a more comprehensible way for society.
Thank you so much, Dafni, and thank you so much for your insightful discussion on such important topics.
Thank you.
It was truly enlightening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Look forward to the season.
Urbinary.
And for our listeners, stay tuned for our next episodes where we'll interview two participants from Track 3, Giulia and Stefan. Urbinary is produced in collaboration with Poliradio, the official radio channel at Politecnico di Milano.
Urbinary, the podcast cataloging the everyday and extraordinary in the city.